Master, it's night again. Beautiful, dark, silent night. I am Tesla, and I can never die, and you are mine. Hi, I'm Bobby, and this episode was requested by my friend Chris, who is an even bigger Bela Lugosi fan than me. Maybe. In Return of the Vampire, Bela Lugosi is playing a vampire named Armand Tesla. But when you have Bela Lugosi playing a vampire, it's kind of implied that he's Count Dracula. And since Universal never did a Dracula sequel featuring him, many consider this movie to be the unofficial Dracula sequel. Bela Lugosi, who was actually born in Transylvania, became a star for his mesmerizing portrayal of Count Dracula, first on Broadway and then in Universal Studios' movie version. For decades, when someone said vampire, you immediately thought of him, and he is still the pop culture image of the character. Unfortunately, he was typecast as a spook, making things even worse. Universal had almost no interest in building up his career. By 1943, they had only done 2 Dracula sequels, and neither one had Lugosi in it. When Universal wasn't hiring, he would do low-budget films for Monogram Studios and take to the stage, often in touring productions of Dracula. Harry Cohn, the president of Columbia Pictures, saw the incredible success that Universal was having with monster movies like Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. And perhaps noticing Lugosi's recent Dracula tour, decided to make his own Bela Lugosi vampire movie. Now, being a notorious cheapskate, he offered Lugosi the low salary of $3,500, which was the same he got for Dracula. Now, Bela could have haggled for more and got it, but at this stage of his career, he didn't want to take a chance on missing out. Because Universal held the rights to Dracula, and depending on the source, either threatened to sue or did try to sue, Columbia couldn't call their vampire Count Dracula, but with Lugosi, you didn't need to. They also had to use a distinctly different werewolf makeup from Universal's Wolfman. Production began on August 18th, 1943, with Bela doing the movie during the day and the play Arsenic and Old Lace at night. At the time, it was just a B picture, but is now remembered as a Bela Lugosi classic. In 1918, the vampire Armand Tesla is staked by Professor Saunders and Dr. Jane Ainsley. The movie jumps forward to 1943. Professor Saunders has died in a plane crash, but Dr. Jane Ainsley is still running her hospital. Her son, John, is engaged to Professor Saunders' daughter, Nikki, and Tesla's old slave, Andreas, is working as Jane's lab assistant. However, luckily for Tesla, a Nazi bomb hits the cemetery. 2 cemetery workers see Tesla's body amongst the debris and remove the spike. Tesla prowls the night again and is out for revenge against the family whom tried to destroy him. Return of the Vampire is clearly a ripoff of Universal's monster movies. Why is Tesla's slave a werewolf? Because Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman has 2 monsters, so we're going to do it too. But they actually do a great job with it. The atmosphere is just as creepy as Universal's, with plenty of fog in the cemetery. When Tesla is on the prowl, we hear the dogs barking and the wind whistling. There are eerie shots, scenes where we just hear Tesla's voice, summoning his next victim to their doom. Boris, Boris. And some groovy special effects, like when Tesla's face disintegrates, which was done by making a wax mask of Bela Lugosi and then melting it. Because they couldn't make this an official sequel to Universal's Dracula, they work around it and spend the first 15 minutes doing their own condensed version of the original. Dr. Lady Jane Ainsley is like Dr. Seward, complete with her hospital adjoining her grounds, and her old teacher, Professor Saunders, is like Professor Van Helsing. During this prologue, they keep Tesla's face hidden, which creates an air of mystery and connects it to the book Dracula, where very often you feel his presence, even when you can't physically see him.
The light! My eyes! My dream! Don't come in here! Don't touch me! No, I didn't tell them! I didn't tell them!
The rest of the movie acts as a sequel to those first 15 minutes, and you see a lot of influence from the official Dracula sequel, Dracula's Daughter. Jane Ainsley is in trouble for murdering Tesla, just how in Dracula's Daughter, Van Helsing was in trouble for murdering Dracula. They use 3 of the same supporting actors, and they have plenty of corny comedy relief. Perhaps he sleeps under the bed. Oh no, sir, he'd hardly do that. As a result, it feels at home with the other Dracula movies, but doesn't offer too many surprises. However, what elevates both the original and the stolen material is the fantastic cast. As always, Bela brings his dark intensity to the role. And while Armand Tesla was conceived as a Dracula knockoff, there are differences, so Bela plays him differently. Armand Tesla was a doctor studying vampires in the 1700s, and he became so involved that he became trapped as one himself, which parallels Lugosi's own typecasting. Combine that with previously being staked, and there's a bitterness within the character. When we first see him, he looks older, weaker, but out for revenge. Andreas! 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 You have no power over me. That was ended many years ago. I'm no longer your slave. You're a fool, Andreas, a complete, utter fool. Your fate is to be what you are, is mine is to be what I am, your master. No, I won't let you! No, no! Look at me, Andreas. Master, you have come back. Part of it was his age, he was in his early 60s, but also the way they film him. And as he rehydrates, he's shot in a more flattering fashion, and you get a bit of that old Dracula charm. Because Tesla was originally a man, he's not as otherworldly as the Count. But with a man's passion, he's even more evil. Then there's Andreas the werewolf, played by Matt Willis. He has no connection to the full moon. Instead, in a Jekyll and Hyde kind of way, he turns into a wolf when he's under the influence of Tesla. While this may seem strange, remember this was before werewolf mythology was such a part of our culture. Matt Willis is great at being sympathetic and tortured in his human form. Now as for his fuzzy form, there have been scarier werewolves, but I absolutely love how he relishes being evil.
There were 2 men in the boat, Master. Their bodies are lying at the bottom of the channel, with rocks about their feet.
Incidentally, he hated those fangs because they made his gums hurt. Towards the end, he finds his inner strength and faith and goes against his vampire master. Then there's Frida Enniscort as Dr. Lady Jane Ainsley. It's neat to see a woman in the traditionally male role of vampire hunter, which is a reflection of the more empowered woman of the war era. And she has this quiet confidence about her, and I actually find her more likable and more engaging than Edward Van Sloan's Professor Van Helsing in Dracula. And finally, there's future Oscar nominee Nina Foch, who brings extra depth and poignancy to her vampire victim role, Nikki. Nina lived long enough to see the cult status of the film, and remember Bela as being a nice and gracious man, who was always drinking Hungarian sulfur water. I'd rather have blood. Along with the cast making the film fascinating, so does World War II. The story takes place in England during World War II, which was going on at that time. And they include elements of the war into the movie. There are several instances of the Nazis bombing England, and Tesla takes on the identity of a doctor, Hugo Bruckner, whom escaped a Nazi concentration camp. Sometimes this comes across as a little campy, because Dr. Hugo Bruckner escaped the real-life horrors of a Nazi concentration camp, and is then immediately killed by a werewolf. Them's the breaks. But it's also intriguing, because Nazi bombs and concentration camps were just part of everyday life in Europe. And that's how the movie treats it, is nothing special. So when you watch Return of the Vampire, aside from the monsters, you're getting a slice of those people's lives in a very matter-of-fact and undramatized kind of way. To avoid competition with Universal's Son of Dracula, which came out in November of 43, Columbia waited till the following January to release The Return of the Vampire. It was a hit, and they were going to do a sequel, Bride of the Vampire, but ended up doing a werewolf movie instead, Cry of the Werewolf, which also featured Nina Foch. Bela Lugosi's career didn't benefit from the film's success, and this was his last leading role in a major studio production. Andreas' werewolf makeup would be used in several more Columbia films, including 1956's The Werewolf. Return of the Vampire is the closest thing we ever got to a Bela Lugosi Dracula sequel. And if you love Dracula and Bela Lugosi, I think you're going to go just batty over it. So I give it 3 plagiarizing writers out of 4. And now I'd like to give some special shoutouts to 2 groovy horror channels, Grumpy Andrew's Horror House and to Horror Gang, and to my friend Chris's Facebook group, a celebration of the life and art of Bela Lugosi. Have a fantastic day.